In the previous video, I told you about the evolution of language regarding peasant and then farmer and then agriculture and the whole power plays and social engineering efforts that are behind that evolution of language, which is always the case. I want to offer some reflections on the human activity as a whole of producing food through culture, through the exploitation of the land to deliberately produce certain types of food in certain types of ways. So before agriculture, nomadism was very prevalent in human society, and we had lots of hunter-gatherer types of organizations. Now, what I find extremely interesting is that farming developed around the same time as religions were introduced. To me, that is very telling. That is very telling. It tells me that a new kind of control over humanity was being developed, initiated and developed by making people sedentary, which means much easier to control, and then colonizing their psyche through dogma and ritual, which was the invasion of human spirituality by imperial control methods. Now, what became relatively quickly apparent is that what we now call agriculture, so farming, the exploitation of the land to produce food in a methodic way, instead of harvesting foods that are spontaneously produced by nature, that was having a rather destructive effect on the ecosystems. The place where these methods were implemented on a large scale in the Middle East, what we now call the Middle East, and at a time where that area was called the Fertile Crescent, from Mesopotamia, the area between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, and the river Nile. That whole area was called the Fertile Crescent because it was exploited in a very intensive way in order to produce food. The soils were being exhausted by these practices, and the land was transformed into a savanna that was particularly obvious in Mesopotamia. So the soil was, the landscape was being transformed into a steppe like kind of landscape. So agricultural practices have always had, from the beginning, a destructive impact on ecosystems. And that destructive impact has been ramped up in the 20th century, when the industrial methods were really transposed in a massive way into the world of farming. And even though that process had started in the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century, it was really accelerated massively in the second half of the 20th century through what has been called the Green Revolution. And the Green Revolution was heavily promoted by a body, an entity, an organization that is the Rockefeller Foundation. And like many other societal evolutions that took place over the 19th century, the Rockefeller Foundation played a very prominent role in the promotion and expansion of that so-called Green Revolution. And that is when heavy pollution became an essential part of farming practices. And intensive agriculture became the norm, the model that was promoted everywhere. And I would actually call it hyper-intensive agriculture that is so destructive to the quality of the soil, that the soil itself cannot support plant growth anymore. It cannot nourish plants, and so you become entirely dependent on fertilizers in order to produce any kind of growth at all. So you destroy the soil, and then you become entirely dependent on the chemical industry in order to continue your activity. So it's all part of that methodical enslavement machinery that we see at work everywhere. And it started a long time ago, and it seems that it's always been part of that particular kind of activity. But the poisoning aspect is something that is really recent. It's really recent. It's only in the 20th century, and particularly the second half of the 20th century, that making food poisonous became the norm, and that special branches of agriculture needed to be developed that we call organic. It's really amazing that this is nowadays a fringe sector of the food production practices. Organic is fringe, whereas it's just the production of, shall I say, normal types of food that haven't been, where poison hasn't been used in the production process. And things have gotten to the point where even in so-called organic farming you're going to find poison. You're going to find traces of poison in the food, because it is these compounds they spread everywhere. So this is all very deliberate. It's always part of the same agenda of keeping the human race under control and exploiting it. And in the next video I'm going to discuss what's going on now with agriculture.